Hello! Today I'm going to tell you a story called The Ant Castle. In a small village in which the trees towered over, the rivers and the lakes were clean and pure, the flower blossomed, the air had the scent of a baby's breath, lived a colony of ants. The ants were very beneficial. The ants were always busy making sure that the environment was in accordance with the ecosystem. They were good for the soil, allowing oxygen to reach the plants. They were taking seeds to help the growth of new plants. The ants were so clean and live a pretty organic lifestyle. Until one day, they heard of a group of anteaters coming their way. The anteaters ate crops and soft fruit. The ants were petrified, as they never heard nor seen anteaters before. Upon their arrival, the ants realized how much bigger and stronger the anteaters were. They looked enormous. At first, they managed to get along. But until one night, when the ants organized a wedding. During that wedding, they had invited other ants from the nearest villages. Amongst them were red ants, who are known for their sharp bites. It was a great opportunity for the ants to be introduced to the anteaters. The anteaters seemed to be quite careless at times. They were stepping and crushing ants accidentally. The chief ant told the ants not to get angry because they were known for their sharp bites. The chief ant said, "We know the anteaters have hurt members of our family, but according to them, it was accidental." The chief of the village of the ants warned the red ants to keep their babies and wives away from the anteaters. The party was in full swing. The bride and the grooms were finally happy to start their new life together. The anteaters noticed some palm wine that was left from the villagers to mature. The anteaters had drank that palm wine and began stepping on the ants deliberately. The red ants couldn't contain their anger, and they began to bite the anteaters in return. They covered them in bites, and anteaters had a tongue so long, covered in little hooks called filiform papillae, and they used their tongues to scoop the ants off them. Some ants stayed on their tongues, and as they swallowed those ants, they realized how tasty they were, and they continued to eat more and more ants, and the ants were biting them in return. As the ants were biting the anteaters, the ants developed a new taste for flesh. The ants were petrified. They wanted to run away from their own village. Because the anteaters had gone to their families to tell them how great and tasty the ants were, Quickly after, a war erupted between the ants and the anteaters. The more the ants were fighting, the more the anteaters were eating them. The ants felt unsafe in their own village, so they decided to migrate. And when they migrated, the ants determined to build an ant castle to stop the anteaters from hurting them. The ants have never been the same again. The anteaters remained in the village until they got all the ants they could, and the runaway ants managed to build a new village and castles for their protection. Since then, they've been building castles to ensure their safety and their long life.